Hello, this is Craig Camp, and welcome to Troon Talk, where we dig deeply into Demeter biodynamic and regenerative organic certified wine growing and farming at Troon Vineyard in Oregon's Applegate Valley. This is meant to be a podcast for those that aspire to, as the Regenerative Organic Alliance says, farm like the world depends on it. These interviews will be focused on our work here at Troon Vineyard, but will also include the work of other farmers committed to regenerative agriculture. And now for today's interview. In this episode of Troon Talk, winemaker Nate Wall and assistant winemaker Hannah Thorning discuss the 2023 vintage at Troon Vineyard.
Hello there. This is Nate and Hannah, winemaking team here at Troon Vineyard. And now this is early December. The harvest craziness has really started to recede from our sleep-deprived memories. And we're able to start thinking about what we just did and kind of take a look back at this past harvest and recollect a bit. So in terms of a recap here, 2023 for us, we harvested 72 tons this year from 16 different grape varieties. This was actually, in terms of tonnage, maybe a little lower than we were hoping for. There was some interesting weather that happened around fruit set, bloom and fruit set, some rains, things like that, some cold weather that may have led, at our site at least, for slightly lower than expected yields. But beyond that, we did get pretty good yields across many of the grape varieties. And for us, that means this year, our largest single variety we brought in was Syrah. And that was actually 3 different clones of Syrah we brought in. Then in terms of our harvest percentages would be Vermentino, then Mourvedre, Grenache, and then kind of gets into other fun Rhone varieties, some Cinsault and Grenache Blanc and Carignan and things like that. But it was a fun year for us, just starting to get what is starting to up the percentages of these different Rhone varietals for us, and really starting to see, especially with some of the new plantings of these grape varieties that we have, really what they're going to start offering us for the future. So that was really fun this year.
Our first pick this year was Block 3 Syrah, Clone 470, and that went into one of our new concrete fermenters and will be a gorgeous red wine. And we also that day picked half of Block 10 Cinsault, and that went into our rosé and into our carbonic fermented Cinsault. We've been making this carbonic Grenache, and this year we just really liked the Cinsault and wanted to see what that would do. And so this year we, at the moment in the cellar, have two carbonic wines. We have our Cinsault and our Grenache. The final pick of the year this year happened on October 18th. And it consisted of Counois for rosé, which is kind of a weird one to get in at the end, and our Carignan, which will be a red wine, and we're really excited to see how it shows.
Yeah, so it was fun to start getting some of these different varieties, as I mentioned earlier, and Counois is an interesting example for us of how the varieties that we have planted here, we kind of have a couple different intentions for them. Counois is definitely requires more heat than the Applegate Valley gets on any of our even most recent, past 10-year averages, even these warmer years we've been having. But for the time being, this makes a really interesting rosé, even though it takes pretty much through the end of the season to ripen for rosé, but who knows? I mean, at some point, hopefully none too soon, but we might be shifting a climate enough that Counoise starts becoming a nice red wine for us. But luckily, that time is not yet. And speaking of harvest dates, with Troon, we make our picking decisions based on acid. So not just sugars, but we look at sugars, we look at flavors, development, tannin development. But for us, the most important parameter is picking on acid. And because we don't modify our chemistry in any way, we really need the acid to be correct to lead to balanced wines without us manipulating them in the cellar. So even though, like Hannah just said, like this wasn't necessarily a warmer year or not, not incredibly so, but the conditions we did have were so perfect in terms of these warm but not blazingly hot temperatures that it actually was interesting. It led to a year where the acids, when the acids were where we wanted them to be, the sugar levels were actually slightly lower than they have been in the previous years. So what this ultimately means is that we're going to have our 2023 wines will be lower in alcohol, and we're already on the low side for alcohols. So we will have a nice lower alcohol wines in 2023. That's just, there was less sugar to ferment in those grapes. The fermenting sugar, of course, being converted over into alcohol. And interestingly, though, beyond total acidity being maybe a little lower, the malic acid levels were rather high. So malic acid there's two primary acids in grapes, tartaric acid and malic acid. And malic acid is typically undergoes a malolactic fermentation process that converts the malic acid into lactic acid. And because our malics were rather high this year, what this should do is we'll have more of that malolactic conversion happening. And that generally leads to a richness like in the mouthfeel of the wines. And so the be all and end all here is we're hoping we should actually have slightly lower alcohol wines that are simultaneously rich and round due to that combination of the malolactic and the lower sugars.
Another big excitement that we had this year was all of the new concrete vessels that we got. We got the 4 large rectangular red fermenters and one large concrete dolium, which is kind of an upside down egg shape and is pretty similar in shape to our amphora, but it is significantly larger, nice thick concrete walls. In our red fermenter this year, we did our Syrah Clone 470. And this was one of the first wines that we brought in. And I'm just really excited to see what the concrete tank does for the purity of fruit coming through in that wine. In our dolium, we fermented the Vermentino from block 12, and we're really excited as that's going to be a pretty large percentage of our estate Vermentino coming out in 2023. So that'll be a really nice blend of this very crisp, clean concrete Vermentino and some of our Vermentino that was fermented in the neutral oak barrels. In addition, we have the smaller amphora that we again did our amber Vermentino in. About 30% whole cluster on that wine. And then we have our slightly larger amphora that are going to be aging our red Mourvèdre in them this year.
Then we still have an egg.
Oh my gosh, the egg.
Can't forget one of our favorites.
The egg, I know. We also have our concrete egg and are really excited for the second year of concrete Roussanne that we're going to be getting out of that. Those concrete vessels take a little bit of time to kind of get a season on them. And so we're going to be seeing what that wine is. Both the vessel that it's in and the vines are 1 more year mature. And so we're just really excited to see that wine coming out of that vessel.
Yeah, and speaking of kind of exciting things to see in the cellar, we have in our cellar right now 2 full barrels of Negrette, which Negrette is a red grape from southwest of France, Fronton region, kind of near the town of Toulouse in France. And as far as we know, this is the first Negrette in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, technically last year we harvested a couple 100 pounds of Negrette, and that was a whopping 3% of our rosé blend from last year. But like, we actually have 2 full barrels of 100% Negrette. And as far as there's can't be really any in the Pacific Northwest, Washington or Oregon, and I only know of maybe 2. It's possible there's a 3rd vineyard in California who has any Negrette, and even there, it's just a couple acres at these places. So, but this is an interesting red grape. We think climatically it should be a really good match for Troon. And so this is really the first year that we'll be able to taste it and see just what it does here. And kind of along those lines, like, that's when you're walking around our cellar now and you look at the barrels and you're looking at all the barrel labels, it's really fun to see all of these like really interesting Rhone varieties that are just, with full barrels all throughout our cellar. It's been, we've been going through a replanting process of our site, and it takes, several 3-4 years to really start getting grapes from those new plantings, and finally seeing these things come to fruition and just having it surround you in the cellar is really fun. We'll have a lot of fun. We've started doing tasting some of the barrels as they've finished up with their primary fermentations, or going through malolactic fermentations right now, and just starting to get a sense of these new wines we will be having. And really exciting to see and taste.
All of us here at Troon really love bubbles, and so we're excited again this year to be making a few different types. With our vines getting a little bit older in the vineyard, we were once again able to make a pet Tannat this year, which we are just in love with. Beautiful acid, really nice dry brut sparkling wine. We also once again are making the Fiano Fizz from Cole Vineyards, and as always are making our Paquette from our rosé and our white and our rosé picks.
A lot of several things and love still will be on the docket here for 2023, but then we will also be introducing some new and exciting things once we end up bottling these wines. And of course, they'll be in barrel or in the cellar aging in one way or the other for at least a year, generally speaking. Although some of the whites, the Vermentino, the Rosé, those will be bottled hopefully late spring, so we can get those out. Sometimes with spontaneous ferments, the wines have other things in mind than meeting our preferred production and bottling schedule. They just take their own sweet time, and they're ready when they're ready. But this year actually is, and this is an interesting thing with native ferments, is that's something that does vary from year to year as well. And this year, kind of like knock on wood here, but I think we saw most of our ferments kind of reach that like very low, not totally dry yet, but very low sugar level faster than they did certainly last year. And so I'm hoping that means that even though it's starting to get very cold in our cellar, temperatures are down, it's kind of like being in a refrigerator in there. The biological activity really slows down. We don't have a whole lot of action that happens until the spring starts warming things up, but I think we've gotten a really good head start on it this year, and hopefully that will lead to those wines deciding to finish sooner than later so we can get them in a bottle and get them out to you. So yeah, thanks for listening, and we will be back with more information on how these wines are doing as things continue to move along in the cellar.
We are happy to share this podcast from Troon Vineyard, a Demeter biodynamic and regenerative organic certified winery in Oregon's Applegate Valley. We farm like the world depends on it by growing produce in our gardens and naturally crafting authentic wines. We will be sharing these in-depth podcasts several times a month. To learn more, I encourage you to visit our website at troonvineyard.com and those of the Regenerative Organic Alliance at regenorganic.org and Demeter Biodynamics at demeter-usa.org. Thanks for sharing our voyage to regenerative agriculture with us.